What's happening, Bills Mafia? Ryan Thomas here, live for another episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Very hyped up to get into this one. There are a ton of misconceptions, I think, within, cliches of sports. One of my favorite cliches in sports is none other than competition breeds success. I've always found that tagline to be one that I've greatly enjoyed stating, whether it's on this show or just in conversations with others. Before I get into the whole competition breeds success cliche, and in particular how that cliche pertains to the Buffalo Bills training camp, the 2021 Buffalo Bills training camp battles to watch for, which battles do I see as competition breeds success type battles? But before I get into that whole thing within this episode, I want to remind you guys that you can find the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on all podcasting platforms, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere you find your podcasts, you can find my show. Greatly appreciate the love and support that I've received along the way from plenty of members of Bills Mafia, and you guys know who you are. You guys understand what the show is all about. It's about providing content for Buffalo Bills fans. So I greatly appreciate you guys tuning in each and every episode, whether it's a random episode like this one or another episode down the line. I greatly appreciate it. So thank you for the support. I got to say that first and foremost. So as I touched on in the introduction, the cliche competition breeds success. Where does the competition actually come from? A lot of people have looked at, a Bills roster, or let's just say the Jets roster, just spitballing out here. They've looked at rosters and they've said, well, competition is going to come from that position because there isn't a clear cut, number one, number two, number three, what have you at that particular position. My thought process is competition actually comes from positions of strength. When you have depth at a particular position, that's where you see the iron sharpens iron mentality. That's where you see a lot of these players show out and show up. And you see a lot of these players, for lack of a better term, be minimized in terms of being beat out for that particular position. And I have a couple training camp battles, exactly 4 training camp battles that I'm extremely excited to discuss here on the show today. And first and foremost, the cornerback position. Now, this is one that I think it's safe to say the Bills have a number one corner by the name of Trey White, who is one of the best corners in the game today. Top 3, top 2, you could say best corner in the National Football League, and I wouldn't disagree with that assessment. But Tre'Davious White, to me, is not only one of the best corners, he's one of the best corners without a true CB2 alongside him. And this training camp battle is a little interesting in terms of how I laid this one out. Taron Johnson versus Levi Wallace versus Dane Jackson. I'm including Taron Johnson in this, although I do see Taron Johnson as the hands-on favorite to be the slot corner or nickel corner for this Buffalo Bills team. And that's okay. You can play that role. A player that can play within his role really, really well. That's a player to have. That's a guy you want on your roster. But I'm throwing him in there in terms of Johnson, Wallace, and Jackson, and possibly playing for more snaps because Taron Johnson played really, really well. Now, he would be an undersized CB2, but in terms of snaps and the amount of snaps and the quality of snaps that he could possibly get, I really like the idea of Taron Johnson being lumped into this quote-unquote competition breeds success competition with Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson. Now, Levi Wallace is somebody that a lot of Bills fans are either really, really high on or they are very, very low on. I have had a love-hate relationship with Levi Wallace for the last couple years, but slowly and definitely surely, I have grown to appreciate Levi Wallace for who he is in terms of what he brings to the table. He is a young, undrafted player out of the University of Alabama with size at the cornerback position that you typically don't see. Not only that, throwing Levi Wallace out there to be burned, or throwing Levi Wallace out there one-on-one with top of the line, top of the food chain wide receivers, I think was actually smart in terms of his development. You're only going to get better by going against the best. And if you fail initially, those are the things that you can brush up on in order to get better the next time out, whether it's 1 week later, 2 weeks later, or a season later. I have liked what I have seen from the development standpoint of within Levi Wallace's game. And I think that Bills fans are a little bit quick to say that this is not the right player for this particular role or for this particular position. I understand it, because there have been moments where Levi Wallace has been burned. There has been moments where Levi Wallace has looked a little bit lost out there. But I will also say that there are moments where Levi Wallace has made some really nice tackles out there. And for me to say, Levi Wallace in terms of his tackling is a key attribute in his game, it's pretty rare when you can say that about a corner at all, let alone a corner that's undrafted, even out of Alabama. And then how does Dane Jackson, fit into this whole mix? One of the guys that I had written down on my notepad when I'm heading to St. John Fisher was Dane Jackson. And that was in an ideal circumstance. I'm heading to St. John Fisher thinking that that's going to happen, and it didn't happen. But one of the guys that I had written on my notepad to keep my eye out on was Dane Jackson. And I didn't get to see him in training camp. I didn't get to see him much at all in the preseason, in very limited snaps. I didn't get to see him much at all in the regular season until later on in the season, when the Bills had maybe some guys that were a little bit banged up, or there was more of an opportunity for Dane Jackson to play a more pivotal role within this defense. And I liked what I saw. I'm one of those guys that could raise my hand and say I liked what I saw from Dane Jackson, and the limited opportunity that he had, I think he made the most of it. And a game that really stands out to me was the Kansas City Chiefs game, not the AFC title game, but the regular season game, where Dane Jackson was asked to do a little bit more. And I thought he passed, given the opponent and given the circumstance, with flying colors. It was like the first test, check mark, X that one off, cross that one off the list. Dane Jackson was ready, and he showed up. That's big when you're a 7th-round draft choice and you're entrusted to take on a pivotal, opponent, a crucial game, and a team that's one of the best teams, if not, the best team in the AFC, of course. The last couple of seasons, they've been the AFC champions. So how will this shake out? I don't have a predicted winner, but I like the fact that the Bills have 3 young corners that all provide a skill set that can be successful within a role. And whether it's Levi Wallace as the number 2 or Dane Jackson as the number 2, dare I say it, Teron Johnson as the number 2, I like what I have seen from all 3 of these guys. I see that all 3 of these guys have intangibles to possibly be, within that triple threat match of a corner, battle. And Doug Clark says the same thing. The battle I'm most looking forward to seeing is the number 2 cornerback position with Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson. A lot of Bills fans are saying Wallace and Dane Jackson. I'm lumping in Teron Johnson into that, although I do believe he will be the nickel corner for this team. I truly feel as well that, we will see, Johnson, Wallace, and Jackson show some things, and it could be a little bit of a competition there between those 3. So on to the next one. There are a lot of players on this team that I'm excited to watch compete against one another. One of those players as well was a new addition to this team, and that is Jacob Hollister. What do we know about Jacob Hollister? We know that he was a teammate of Josh Allen's in Wyoming. We know that he has played some pivotal snaps with the Seattle Seahawks. We know that he's been a decent player over the course of his career. Not great, not even necessarily good, but I would say average tight end in terms of production that he has put out over the course of his career thus far, and it's a short career especially. But I like the fact that the Buffalo Bills added to this position. I like the fact that you have more competition for Dawson Knox. And I'm a big, Bills Twitter guy. I like to, stay posted and keep everybody posted on Bills Twitter in terms of my takes and everything like that. But I have to say, during the season, a lot of Bills fans were calling for Dawson Knox's head. Not, literally, but, proverbially speaking, they didn't really see what Brandon Beane and what Sean McDermott saw as to why they drafted him. We haven't really quite seen that on a consistent basis in the fashion that we would like to have seen it. Knox has been a guy that I feel physically he's got the tools. It's just a matter of mentally is it all, right there for him to, put together. That is something that only Dawson Knox knows. I follow Dawson Knox. I followed him on social media since he was drafted by the Bills. And he's a player that has worked extremely hard to get into the physical type of condition that you need to be in order to compete at this high of a level. So when I see, Bills fans kind of throwing shade at Dawson Knox, I have to say, hold the phone here. I know this guy is trying. Let's not treat this man as if he's not trying, as if this man isn't physically, busting his hump to, make his own impact. He definitely has. And he's heading into the third year of his National Football League career. So I'm not going to be quick to jump to conclusions in saying that Dawson Knox is not the right guy for the Buffalo Bills in the tight end position. I'm not going to be quick to say that Dawson Knox is a bust or anything like that. And neither is Brandon Beane and neither is Sean McDermott. But that's not to say that Dawson Knox doesn't deserve to go against someone in training camp, enter in Jacob Hollister, who, on the surface, if you're Dawson Knox, you're looking at who did they bring in to compete with me? They're looking to bring in a guy that already has had a working relationship with Josh Allen. And for whatever reason, as quickly as Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen were able to mesh together, Dawson Knox and Josh Allen just haven't really been able to find that chemistry that you would hope to see between your quarterback and your tight end. And it's feast or famine at this point. For Jacob Hollister, this is his first legitimate opportunity to be a starting tight end in the National Football League. And for Dawson Knox, this is his, entering into his third season where it's his job to take and it's also his job to lose. So I'm very excited to see how that plays itself out. We're, miles away from training camp, but to me, it's never too early to give a take as to who you're feeling for training camp. Devin Singletary versus Zack Moss versus Matt Brieda. I'm very excited about the running back position heading into this season, and I'm excited in the sense that I love what Buffalo has done over the course of their offseason, adding big bodies on the defensive line, big bodies on the offensive line. In particular, the flashy additions are the Boogie Bashams and the Gregory Rosseaus, who I'll get to in a little bit. But the humble pie additions of this team, just the blue collar lunch pail additions to this team, with these late mid-round offensive linemen and Trent Brown and Tommy Doyle. I'm drawing a blank on the two linemen that they picked. Sorry about that, but Doyle, and there was another one, and I'm drawing a blank. But either way, two new offensive linemen were added to this team, and I don't necessarily know if they will be immediate impact guys in terms of starters. But what I do know is that it's nice to have that depth, in particular for your offensive line. Spencer Brown. I knew it was Brown. Couldn't remember the first name. Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle. Tommy Doyle out of Miami of Ohio. Spencer Brown out of Northern Iowa. They're big-bodied offensive linemen, depth additions to this team that I think are decent additions in terms of this whole training camp experience, right? But I think they have their offensive line practically ironed out. I feel like their offensive line, more likely than not, will be very similar to what it was last season. But to have these backup offensive linemen on a rotational basis, I think is actually going to significantly help the Buffalo Bills run game. And the biggest question to me on this Buffalo Bills roster is not on the defensive side of the ball, actually. It's on the offensive side of the ball, and it is who will be that true number one running back on this team. Granted, you have a National Football League now where you have a shared backfield, right? But each team has that one guy. Each team has that guy that they know is the better running back. We don't know which one is better between Devin Singletary, Zack Moss, and now new addition Matt Brieda, who I really liked heading into, last season with Miami. I thought he would, be used a little bit more than he was. He wasn't. And Buffalo brings him in the next season, and I'm excited to see what happens with that. I think as is everybody. But to me, the battle is between two running backs that have been on this team the last few years. I throw Matt Brieda into the mix because he has started games before. I just don't know, based on him being a new addition and him trying to get acclimated to the playbook and the offense, if he will be as much of a factor as the other two, in Singletary and Moss. And, going into last season, I really liked Devin Singletary. I thought he was the favorite to not just win the job, but to hold the fort down and, solidify that position. But he did take a step back last year. He knows it. Everybody else knows it. There was a step back. Whatever it was, for whatever reasons, you can name a few different reasons as to why, Devin Singletary just didn't show up and show out like he had the year prior. It just didn't happen. Zack Moss is more of that traditional north-south running back that you'd like to have on a team to pound it in between the tackles and get that 3-4 yards. But there's facets to his skill set that Devin Singletary has that Moss doesn't, and vice versa. They complement each other very well, but which one will actually become the RB1? I think over a 17-game season now, you're going to see even less of an opportunity for a running back to become that true RB1 due to the fact that the season is even 1 week longer. You have your guy through September, October, that's Singletary. You have your guy through November, December, that's Zack Moss. Playing in warm weather, Singletary, I feel like, might be more efficient than Moss. He's shiftier back. He's a yards per carry back in comparison to Zack Moss, despite the fact that Moss is bigger. We'll find out, which one out of the two shows their skill set. But from what I have seen this offseason, Devin Singletary has been working really, really hard to physically get into a whole new body, a whole new level, mentally, physically, and spiritually heading into this season, and that excites me. So I think for me, the favorite right now is Devin Singletary, but that could obviously change as we inch closer to the regular season. So the last battle that I have in terms of competition breeds success, the 2021 Buffalo Bills training camp battles to watch for here on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. The last battle that I have that I think is the best battle to watch for in this 2021 offseason and in this 2021 training camp is none other than Boogie Basham versus Greg Rosseau versus AJ Epenesa. Now, these are three top picks in the last 2 years. Gregory Rosseau was the first rounder this year. Boogie Basham was the second rounder this year. And AJ Epenesa was the second rounder last year. Technically, you can consider him the first pick in the Bills draft last year because they didn't have a first rounder due to the fact that they sent it packing to the Minnesota Vikings for Stephon Diggs. I'd make that trade 10 times out of 10 in case you're wondering, especially in hindsight. That's worked out for the Bills pretty well. But it's tough nowadays, similarly to the running back position, where you don't have a true one. You have running back by committee, timeshare, whatever you want to call it. You have a similar dynamic to the pass rushing position, defensive end in particular, especially in Sean McDermott's defense. He likes to rotate these guys. He likes to keep them fresh. He likes to throw different looks defensively, given the down and distance situation. But the fact is, Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott looked at this roster in a foreshadowing type way. you look at each position and look at how old some of these guys are, how young some of these guys are. Where are we oldest at on this roster? We were oldest at the defensive end position on this roster with guys like Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes on the wrong side of 30. You bring in young talent at those positions in Boogie Basham and Gregory Rosseau, two very dynamic, unique athletic specimens for that position, but very different in terms of the athleticism that they bring to the defensive end pass rusher position. And Gregory Rosseau, 6'7", 260. Boogie Basham, more of a traditional NFL body, 6'4", 285, 295 pounds, somewhere in between there. And then AJ Epenesa, as soon as he was picked by Buffalo, those that talked about the pick, whether it was Mel Kiper or some of these draft experts out there, they believed that Epenesa is small for the defensive end position. And even if he bulked up, he still wouldn't be, quote unquote, long enough or big enough to play defensive end. I'm not saying that. They said that. I'm not saying that. But so far, 1 year into AJ Epenesa's career, I barely heard his name called. And you have to have that steady progression from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, and then the sky's the limit. I hope that we see more progression from AJ Epenesa. He's one of those guys on my list that drastically needs to step it up, and he has to step it up because now he does have competition, guys that are going to be competing for his snaps, or beyond his snaps, guys that are competing for not just AJ Epenesa's snaps, but for Jerry Hughes' snaps, for Mario Addison's snaps. Boogie Basham and Gregory Rosseau were two very smart picks by this Bills regime. Rosseau is listed as a guy that might take some time in terms of translating to the National Football League. Boogie Basham, as I said, more of a traditional body. But I think the fact that you have two rookie defensive linemen, defensive ends in particular, two guys at the same position, they're both going through it together. They're both understanding what it takes in terms of making it and getting ready and getting prepared for this upcoming season. I'm very pumped for this facet of a competition because I think that this will really show who's the best defensive end out of these three. And these are three young players that the Bills have invested, premium draft choices on. And all three of them have to show something, to be honest. Whoever loses this battle can't necessarily lose it in the sense that if they lose the battle, they're still getting snaps. All three of these guys are getting snaps, but which one will be the ones? That's the big question. So I am super pumped for training camp, super pumped to continue videos like this. Garth Strobel asked me for my thoughts on Tommy Sweeney, one of the few guys in his rookie training camp that I really, really liked a couple years back was Tommy Sweeney. He was very sure-handed. Hopefully he can stay healthy. That's something that has hurt him the last couple years. As long as he stays healthy, he will also be thrown in there in that tight end competition. So there you have it. I'm Ryan Thomas. It was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Of course, feel free to subscribe to the show on YouTube, like the Facebook page, and stay up to date for all things sports, whether it's National Football League discussions, mixed martial arts talk, boxing. We got some big fights coming up. The next big one, of course, Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier, the trilogy. I cannot wait to dive into that fight in the coming weeks. So stay tuned for that and much, much more. Thank you for tuning in. And last and certainly not least, go Bills.